My name's Daniel Mercer, and I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since last July. When I close my eyes too long, I don't just see it, I hear it. The whisper of footsteps on gravel. The flap of canvas in the wind. That wet, sucking sound like boots pulled from deep mud, coming closer and closer until it's right outside my door. This is about what happened at Camp Ashwood. And before you write me off as some sleep-deprived lunatic spinning ghost stories, just remember this. The campground was full. Every site was booked. Families, kids, retirees, weekend RV warriors, the works. By the time the sun rose the next day, my family and I were the only ones left. Ashwood had always been our fallback spot. We'd been camping there since our kids were in grade school, pulling the same dented silver Airstream up that narrow mountain road, parking in lot C12 near the east tree line, and roasting marshmallows under the same crooked pine that looked like it had grown sideways just to give us shade. My wife, Kelly, loved it for the trails. Our son, Mark, liked fishing the little reservoir. Our daughter, Ellie, she just liked making friends. By the second day of any trip, she'd have a pack of campground kids playing tag or flashlight hide and seek until late. Ashwood was safe, predictable, familiar. At least it used to be. We arrived late on a Friday, the sun already dropping behind the ridge. The campground was packed, rows of RVs lined up like aluminum totems, campfires popping and crackling, laughter floating between the trees. It looked like every site was taken, just like the ranger station sign had promised. I remember thinking it felt comforting, almost festive, pulling into that crowd. After a long week at work, surrounded by spreadsheets and fluorescent lights, the glow of campfires and the smell of wood smoke felt like medicine. Kelly leaned out the passenger window, grinning. "Looks like the whole world had the same idea," she said. "Good thing we booked early." I maneuvered us into spot C12, wheels crunching over gravel. Ellie was already unbuckled, pressing her face against the glass, looking for kids her age. Mark sat glued to his phone, pretending he wasn't excited. Typical 15-year-old. We leveled the trailer, hooked up power, and started the usual ritual. Awning out, camp chairs unfolded, cooler cracked open. Across the way, a family was grilling hot dogs, smoke curling up into the purpling sky. Somewhere down the row, someone strummed a guitar. It was normal, safe, ordinary. And then the ordinary ended. It started subtle. After dinner, Kelly and I walked the loop road while the kids played Uno inside the trailer. The air smelled like pine and charcoal. Campfires burned low, voices carried through the trees. But every now and then, mid-laughter, mid-conversation, something cut out. A gap. Like someone had pressed pause on the campground. We'd hear kids shouting, "Tag. You're it." Then silence. A guitar strumming, then nothing, just for a breath too long before sound returned like nothing happened. I slowed. "You hear that?" Kelly frowned. "Hear what?" "The quiet." She gave me the look she gives when she thinks I'm slipping back into one of my stress spirals. The truth is, after my brother died last year, I hadn't exactly been at my best. Nights I couldn't sleep, days I felt like I was underwater. Camping was supposed to fix that, or at least numb it. So I didn't press. I just walked on. But when we got back to our site, Ellie was standing outside the Airstream, wide-eyed. "Where'd they go?" she asked. "Who?" Kelly said. "The kids I was playing with." I looked around. The campsite across from ours, the one with the hot dogs on the grill, was empty. The fire still burned, buns still laid out on the picnic table. But no people. "Probably went for a walk," I said, though my stomach tightened. Ellie shook her head. "We were playing freeze tag. I tagged Rachel, she was right there." She pointed toward the crooked pine. "Then, she wasn't." I tried to laugh it off. Maybe she got called in by her parents. Ellie's voice was small. She didn't move. She just wasn't there anymore. Kelly rubbed her shoulders. "Long drive today, kiddo. You're tired. Let's get ready for bed." But when I looked across the campground again, the laughter and guitar were gone. The fire down the row sputtered out, smoke curling into the dark. We were surrounded by trailers, surrounded by campers, and yet it felt like we were suddenly alone. I woke at 1:47 a.m., not to a sound but to its absence. The woods were silent. No crickets, no owls, no rustle of leaves. Just nothing. I slid from the bed, careful not to wake Kelly, and peered out the window. The campground was dark. Too dark. Most campers string up lights, LEDs, lanterns, even those cheesy plastic tiki torches. But every site was black. Cold. Abandoned. I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside. Gravel crunched under my boots like it was the only sound left in the world. Site after site, the story was the same. RV doors open. Fires half burned. Folding chairs still set in circles. Coolers cracked. Drinks sweating in the humid night air. But no people. It was like they'd all stood up at once and walked away. The only light came from our airstream. And in that light, I noticed something I can't explain, though God knows I've tried. Footprints. Not shoe prints. Not boots. Bare feet. Hundreds of them. Leading away from the campground into the tree line. I don't know what possessed me to follow them. Any rational man would have turned back, locked the RV door, and pretended none of it was real. But rationality and curiosity don't always live in the same house, and that night I was running on equal parts dread and something like compulsion. The footprints were pale ovals in the gravel, dusted in moonlight. Some small, some large. Some overlapping as though dozens, maybe hundreds, had walked side by side. They led straight toward the treeline behind Site C14. I crouched, touched one. The gravel was damp, almost slimy, like the stones near a creek bed. I rubbed my fingers together and felt a faint vibration, like the hum of distant machinery. That's when Ellie's voice came from behind me. Dad. I nearly jumped out of my skin. She stood in her pajamas at the edge of our fire pit, hugging her stuffed bear. The light from the airstream spilled across her face, pale and frightened. What are you doing out here? I hissed. I woke up. Mom was gone. Mark too. Then I saw you out the window. Cold sliced through me. Kelly and Mark weren't in the trailer? I straightened fast, scanning the site. The door to the airstream hung open. Stay right there, I told Ellie. But she shook her head and ran to me, clutching my hand. Her palm was clammy. Where is everybody? She whispered. I had no answer. The prints led deeper into the forest. Against every instinct I followed. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. If Kelly and Mark had vanished like the rest of the campers, then maybe, God help me, maybe the footprints would tell me where they'd gone. The trees swallowed us quick. Beyond the last ring of campsites, the forest grew dense and unnatural, the kind of place where moonlight struggled to break through. Branches twisted overhead like skeletal fingers, strangling the sky. The silence was total. Our breaths were the only sound. Then Ellie tugged my arm. Dad, it's wet. I looked down. The footprints were no longer just impressions in gravel. They were soaked, each step glistening black. My boots crunched through damp leaves and a smell rose up, a swampy stench like pond scum mixed with old rot. But Camp Ashwood wasn't swamp country. The soil here was rocky, the reservoir man-made. This smell shouldn't exist. And yet it grew stronger the farther we went. Ellie pressed close, voice trembling. I don't like it here. Neither did I. But I couldn't turn back. Not yet. After what felt like an hour, though my watch told me it was only 15 minutes, the forest opened into a clearing. The footprints converged at its center. And there, in the moonlight, stood the campers. At least that's what I thought at first. Dozens of figures. Men, women, children. All facing away from us. All perfectly still. My chest swelled with relief and dread. Relief because I thought maybe I'd found Kelly and Mark among them. Dread because something about the stillness was wrong, too rigid, too exact. Mom? Ellie whispered. The figures didn't move. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The smell of rot thickened until it coated my tongue. I squinted at the nearest figure, a man in a fishing vest. His posture was stiff, arms hanging limp. And then I saw it. His feet didn't touch the ground. None of theirs did. They hovered inches above the soil, toes pointed down, as if dangling from invisible strings. Ellie squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Dad, where's Mom?" I couldn't answer. My voice was gone. My mind was screaming at me to turn back, but my legs carried me closer, step by step. That's when the figures turned. All at once. Dozens of heads rotating in perfect unison, slow and deliberate, until blank faces stared straight at us. Not campers. Not people. Their skin was gray, stretched too tight. Their eyes, those that had them, were slick black pits that reflected no light. Some faces had no features at all, just smooth flesh where eyes and mouths should have been. And in the middle of them, Kelly. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open in a silent scream. Mark was beside her, frozen the same way. Ellie cried out, "Mom!" And every head snapped toward her voice. The clearing erupted. The knot people surged forward, feet dragging across the soil with that awful wet, sucking sound I'd heard before. Their arms stretched unnaturally long, fingers twitching, grasping. "Run!" I shouted, yanking Ellie back into the trees. We bolted, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us came the chorus, groans, wheezes, whispers all blending into something inhuman. I risked one glance over my shoulder. The gray figures weren't running. They didn't need to. The forest bent for them, trees leaning aside, soil buckling. They glided forward like puppets on invisible tracks. Ellie tripped on a root, nearly going down. I hauled her up, lungs burning, and pushed harder. The campground had to be close. If I could just get her to the airstream, if I could just lock the door. We burst from the tree line into the ring of campsites. The fire pits were cold now. The RVs stood dark and silent, their doors yawning open like mouths. And in the center of it all, our airstream glowed. The lights were on. I half-dragged Ellie up the steps and slammed the door behind us. My hands shook as I threw the bolt. The interior was warm, bright, familiar. For a moment, I almost believed we'd escaped. Then Ellie pointed. "Dad." Kelly and Mark sat at the dinette, smiling. Too wide. Too still. "Come sit," Kelly said. But her lips didn't move. The voice came from somewhere behind her eyes. Ellie screamed. And the lights went out. When the lights snapped off, the silence inside the airstream was suffocating. My pulse pounded in my ears, too loud, too fast. Ellie clutched my arm so tight her fingernails dug crescents into my skin. In the dark, Kelly's voice came again, bright, cheerful, wrong. "Sit with us, Danny. Everything's fine now." The sound didn't come from her mouth. It vibrated through the walls, through the floor. I felt it more than I heard it, buzzing in my teeth like an electrical hum. Mark's silhouette shifted at the dinette. Slowly, mechanically. His head tilted sideways too far, like a doll's. Ellie whimpered. "That's not them, Dad." I swallowed hard, forcing words through my dry throat. "Stay behind me." My hand groped along the counter until I found the drawer with the flashlight. I yanked it open, metal rattling, and thumbed the switch. A weak yellow beam flickered on. Kelly and Mark were gone. The dinette was empty, but the cushions were soaked. Dark stains spread across the vinyl, glistening like oil. The smell of rot punched the air, thick and choking. And then the flashlight died. Pitch dark again. I heard it then. Breathing. Not Ellie's. Not mine. Something behind us. Slow, deliberate inhales, rattling, wet like lungs filled with mud. Ellie buried her face in my side, shaking. I fumbled at the drawer, praying the batteries had just come loose, but my fingers were numb, clumsy. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor and bumped against the door. The breathing stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, "Ellie." Her name, spoken in Kelly's voice. But Kelly wasn't here. Ellie screamed and bolted for the back of the trailer. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs. My eyes had adjusted just enough to make out movement. Shadows where shadows shouldn't be, flowing along the ceiling, sliding down the walls. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, the cast iron skillet we kept on the stove. My hand ached from how hard I gripped it. Something brushed my shoulder. Cold. What? I swung blindly. The skillet cracked against metal, denting the cabinet. The airstream shuddered. Not from me but from something outside. A heavy thud rattled the walls. Then another. Like massive hands pressing, testing. Ellie shrieked from the back. Dad. The window. I spun toward her voice. A shape loomed against the glass, too large, too featureless. Its face pressed against the pane, skin slick and pale. No eyes. No mouth. Just smooth flesh, stretching thin as it leaned harder against the glass. The pane spiderwebbed with cracks. I lunged for Ellie, scooping her up. Her little body trembled against me, her breath hitching with sobs. We're getting out, I whispered, though I had no plan, no direction. Just the raw need to move, to survive. The door rattled violently, metal groaning. Something pounded from outside, each strike deeper, harder, bending the hinges. I set Ellie down, crouched to her level. When I say run, you run. Straight to the truck. Don't look back. Tears streaked her cheeks. What if they won't. I'll be right behind you. I prayed it wasn't a lie. Another slam shook the trailer. The bolt snapped clean off the door. Metal screamed as the frame bent inward. No more time. Run. I shoved the door with all my weight. It flew open, slamming into something massive outside. I grabbed Ellie's hand and tore into the night. The campground was chaos. The other trailers were alive. Doors banging, windows rattling, shapes slithering along the walls. Shadows shifted inside them, mimicking voices, mimicking laughter. Every RV sounded occupied, yet every sound was wrong. Too sharp. Too hollow. Bare footprints smeared the gravel road ahead of us, glowing faintly as though lit from below. Ellie tripped, but I yanked her upright, adrenaline making me stronger than I'd ever been. The truck was 20 yards away. Behind us, something screamed. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was a sound that split the air itself, high and shrill, dropping into a bone-deep rumble that shook the ground. Ellie clamped her hands over her ears and wailed. I didn't look back. I couldn't. 10 yards. Fuck. We reached the truck. I threw open the door, shoved Ellie inside, and dove in after her. My hands shook so badly I missed the ignition twice before the key finally caught. The engine roared to life. Relief surged, until the headlights flicked on, and illuminated them. The figures stood in the middle of the gravel loop, blocking the exit. Dozens of them. Gray, featureless, swaying like reeds. In the center, Kelly and Mark. They raised their hands in eerie unison, palms out, as though begging me to stop. Ellie sobbed, "It's Mom. We can't leave them." I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles burned. My eyes blurred with tears. It looked like them. It sounded like them. But deep down I knew. Whatever stood there wasn't my family. The shadows shifted closer, closing the gap. Their feet never touched the ground. Their mouths opened, or the places mouths should have been did, and that awful chorus began again. I slammed the truck into gear. And floored it. The front bumper plowed through them like fog. Cold swept the cab, freezing my skin, but there was no resistance. Just a rush of icy emptiness like driving through smoke. Ellie screamed, curled against me. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe. I drove. The road twisted out of the campground, tires spitting gravel. The rearview mirror showed nothing. No headlights, no figures, no campground at all. Just darkness. The forest pressed close on both sides. The truck's beams caught glimpses of impossible shapes. Trees bent at wrong angles, shadows taller than the trunks, eyes glimmering where no animal should be. My chest heaved with panic. It felt like the road itself was stretching, lengthening. No matter how far I drove, the campground lights never appeared behind us, and the ranger station never appeared ahead. Ellie whimpered, "Dad, Are we lost? I couldn't lie. I don't know. The hum started then. Low, vibrating through the steering wheel, syncing with the pulse in my temples. The radio crackled even though it wasn't on. A voice whispered through the static. Not Kelly's. Not Mark's. Older. Deeper. You shouldn't be here. The words coiled in my skull, thick with finality. And just as suddenly as it began, the hum cut out. The trees parted. Headlights washed over the ranger station. The truck screeched to a stop in the gravel lot. The ranger station stood ahead, its wood siding bathed in my headlights. A dim lantern glowed inside, spilling orange light through the blinds. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave. A human place. A building with walls. Maybe even a phone. I turned to Ellie. She was pale, streaked with tears, but still clutching her bear like it was armor. Stay close to me, I told her. She nodded. We stepped out. The night air was heavy, damp, filled with the faint buzz of insects. Actual insects. That tiny sound made me want to sob. It meant we'd left that place. Or at least I thought we had. The station door creaked open. A man sat behind the counter, hunched over a stack of papers. He wore the forest green uniform of the Park Service, wide-brimmed hat hanging on a hook behind him. His badge read Ranger Holt. He looked up as we entered, eyebrows knitting in concern. Y'all got yourselves turned around? Rough night. I just stared, mouth opening and closing like a fish. My brain tried to form words but only managed fragments. They're gone. Campground, my wife, my son. Ranger Holt stood slowly, hands raised like he was calming a spooked horse. Easy. Sit down. Catch your breath. Ellie clung to me, shaking her head. Daddy, don't sit. Holt's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. Something in his expression changed, subtle like a mask slipping. You saw them, didn't you? He said softly. My blood went cold. Holt moved around the counter, boots thudding on the wooden floor. He didn't look surprised. Didn't look confused. He looked tired. Name's Holt, he said. Been stationed here 27 years. And I've seen the Ashwood clearing more times than I care to count. He gestured toward a battered leather book on the counter. The cover was scarred, the edges blackened as if it had survived a fire. You'll want to read this. I didn't move. Ellie whispered, Dad. Holt sighed and opened the book himself. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, line after line of names, dates, and notes. Some entries were decades old, the ink faded. Others looked written yesterday. He tapped a line near the middle. July 14, 1978. Family of 4. Survived the night. Father reported seeing doubles of his wife and children. Claimed the campground was emptied. Only one who made it back was him and the little girl. My skin crawled. Holt shut the book with a thud. Sound familiar? What is it? I demanded. My voice came out harsher than I intended, cracking at the edges. What the hell is out there? Holt rubbed his temples, eyes shadowed. Some folks call it a thin space. A tear in the fabric. Places where here and somewhere else overlap. Somewhere else. I repeated. Call it what you like. The other side. The hollow world. I don't have the words for it. Just know it isn't ours. Ellie's grip on my arm tightened. They take people, I said. They become people, Holt corrected. Or seem to. You can't trust what you see. It'll wear the faces of your loved ones, your neighbors, anyone. But it ain't them. Never was. He stepped closer, voice low. And once you see them, once you notice, they notice you. The station lights flickered. A sound echoed through the lot. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. The front door rattled in its frame. Ellie whimpered, burying her face against my chest. Holt didn't flinch. He just moved back behind the counter and grabbed a shotgun from beneath it. The action clacked as he chambered a shell. Don't answer, he said. The knocks came again, harder. Then a voice. Daniel? Kelly's voice. My stomach twisted. Daniel, it's me. Let us in. Mark's voice joined hers. Dad, please. We're cold. Ellie started crying again. It sounds like them. Holt's face hardened. It isn't. You open that door, you're both gone. The walls vibrated with another impact. The lantern swayed, shadows lurching across the room. Ellie clapped her hands over her ears as the voices outside multiplied. Dozens now, all pleading, all familiar. Every camper we'd seen that night. Let us in. We're hungry. We're lonely. We're family. I thought my skull would split from the noise. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence. For a long minute, no one moved. Finally, Holt lowered the shotgun. They'll try all night, he muttered. Voices, faces scratching at the walls. They feed on memory, on trust. That's how they pull you out. I swallowed, throat raw. And in the morning? If you last until dawn, the veil closes. They can't stay once the sun's up. Ellie looked up at me, eyes wide and wet. We just wait. Holt nodded grimly. I held her tighter, rocking her like I hadn't since she was small. But inside, I knew waiting would be worse than running. Because I'd already seen how patient they could be. And somewhere in that patient dark, they had Kelly. They had Mark. Or something that wore them. The ranger station groaned as the wind shifted, carrying with it the faint echo of voices that weren't supposed to exist. Ellie eventually fell asleep in my lap, small hands still clamped tight around her stuffed bear. Her breaths were shallow, uneven, and I could tell even her dreams weren't safe tonight. I didn't sleep. Neither did Holt. He sat at the counter, shotgun across his knees, staring at the front door like it might breathe. Every now and then he'd glance at the lantern, which was burning lower, the flame jittering against the glass. You said dawn, I whispered finally. My throat was raw from holding words in. A few more hours, Holt said. His voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd lived this before. Sunlight pushes them back. Always has. I wanted to believe him. But outside, something dragged itself across the gravel with a wet, scraping sound. Then came a whisper right against the wall by my head. Daniel, open your eyes. It began slow, tentative. Nails against wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Ellie stirred, whimpered, and clutched tighter to me. I stroked her hair, whispering comfort I didn't believe. The scratching grew faster, angrier, multiplying until it sounded like every inch of the walls was being clawed at once. The wood vibrated, dust sprinkling down from the rafters. Holt stood, raised the shotgun, and fired into the ceiling. The blast silenced everything. For a moment, the night outside was still again. Then, laughter. Not children's laughter. Not human. Something stretched and hollow like the forest itself was mocking us. They never stopped trying, Holt said quietly, reloading with shaking hands. Not really. I stared at him. Then how have you lasted here? 27 years. He didn't look at me. Because I made a deal. The words hit like ice water. What deal? Holt's jaw tightened. Every so often, I open the door. Give them someone. It keeps the rest of us safe. Ellie whimpered in her sleep, and I pulled her tighter against me, heart thundering. You're lying. But I saw the truth in his eyes. Holt didn't answer. The scratching returned, louder, joined by pounding fists and the shudder of something massive brushing against the walls. The lantern flickered violently, sputtering down to a weak ember of light. Ellie bolted upright with a scream. They're inside. And for one terrible moment, I believed her, because in the corner of the room, shadow was pooling unnaturally, stretching upward into the shape of a man. Kelly's face blinked into existence within it. Daniel, it whispered. Then Mark's voice layered over hers. Dad. My vision swam. Every instinct screamed to run, to throw open the door, to make it stop. Holt's hand clamped on my shoulder, iron strong. Don't you dare, he hissed. Time bent strangely after that. Minutes dragged into hours, the lantern dying by inches, every heartbeat a hammer in my chest. The shadows pressed closer, sometimes forming faces, sometimes stretching into impossible angles that hurt to look at. Ellie cried silently, too exhausted to fight the tears. I whispered promises into her hair, empty promises about getting home, about Mom and Mark waiting for us, about things I knew weren't true. Because deep down I knew they were gone. The only question left was whether Ellie and I would join them. At last, the eastern window bled pale light. It was faint at first, barely a suggestion. But the effect was immediate. The scratching stopped. The whispers faded. The shapes in the corner dissolved like mist under a blowtorch. The ranger station exhaled. Ellie let out a sob that shook her whole body. I held her tighter, eyes locked on the window as the sun rose inch by inch, burning the horrors away. By full dawn, the forest was silent. Normal silent. Birds began to sing. Somewhere a squirrel chattered. The world was back. And yet, it wasn't. Holt leaned the shotgun against the counter, shoulders sagging. He looked 20 years older in the morning light. "You made it," he said. But his voice carried no joy. Ellie slid from my lap and ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass. "It's gone," she said. "All of it's gone." I couldn't bring myself to look. "Now what?" I asked Holt. "Now you leave," he said flatly. "Don't come back. Not here. Not anywhere near the Ashwood clearing. And you?" His eyes flicked to the journal on the counter. "Me? I'll keep the record. Until someone else takes over." He didn't say it, but I understood. Until the next deal. Ellie and I left as soon as the sun was high. I didn't ask Holt for help finding our way. I didn't need to. The campground was gone. Not destroyed, gone. The road ended in an overgrown field. No sign there had ever been pads, hookups, or picnic tables. Kelly's car was gone too. I stood in that field for a long time, Ellie's hand in mine, staring at the empty space where my life had been ripped apart. Somewhere just beyond the thin veil, my wife and son were still there. Or something wearing their faces was. The thought followed me as I drove north, past the last line of pines, past the county line, past everything familiar. And it still follows me. Because every now and then, late at night, when the wind shifts just right, I hear them. Kelly calling my name. Mark begging me to let them in. And I know the Ashwood clearing isn't the only place where the world wears thin. Name's Frank Delaney. 67 years old. I worked 38 years as an electrician before retiring, and for the first time in my life I thought I finally had the freedom to breathe. My wife, Marla, had been planning our big trip since before I even put in my retirement papers. "One good RV, Frank," she told me. "One good trip to see the country before we're too old to enjoy it." So we bought one. A brand new Class C with all the trimmings. Bed soft enough to keep her happy, generator strong enough to run my coffee maker, and enough storage space for the grandkids to come along if they ever decided to visit us on the road. It was everything we wanted. A home on wheels. That first day, I remember Marla snapping photos at every gas stop, her smile wide and free. I hadn't seen her that happy in years. I thought, this is it. This is what all the long hours were for. If I'd known what was waiting down the road, I'd have turned us around right then. We pulled into Evergreen Pines RV Park late in the evening, just as the sky was slipping from orange to purple. The place was small, maybe 20 sites in all, tucked between two ridges of pine forest. The host was a young woman with sunburned cheeks and a polite smile. She handed us a map, pointed out the bathhouse and dump station, and wished us a pleasant stay. It looked like any other park. Neat gravel pads, picnic tables, power hookups humming faintly. A few rigs were already set up. An old Airstream with faded paint, a fifth wheel with two mountain bikes strapped to the back, and what looked like a retired Greyhound bus converted into some kind of hippie palace. We backed into our spot, Site 14, hooked up the power and put out the camp chairs. Marla made a pot of chili in the tiny RV kitchen, and for a while, it was everything we'd dreamed about. The forest was quiet. The night was cool. And when the stars came out, It felt like we were the only two people in the world. It started with the radio. I'd rigged up the dash stereo to pull in AM channels better than stock, one of my little projects before the trip. As an electrician, I never lost the itch to tinker. So after dinner, while Marla flipped through a paperback, I fiddled with the dial. Most of what came through was the usual, late-night talk, country music, static. But around 11 p.m. I found something else. A hiss. A hum. And beneath it, faint, broken words. Help, please. I leaned closer. Cold, lost. It was a child's voice. At first, I thought it was some local emergency channel bleeding through. Maybe a kid had gone missing nearby, and the rangers were using every frequency they could to find them. But the longer I listened, the stranger it got. The voice didn't repeat like a distress signal should. It rambled, pleading, sobbing, whispering things I couldn't always make out. It's dark, they're here. A chill worked its way down my spine. Marla looked up from her book. Frank, what is it? I almost told her. But something in me hesitated. Maybe I didn't want her to worry. Maybe I didn't want to admit I was spooked. Just static, I said and switched it off. We went to bed around midnight. Marla fell asleep quickly, the steady rhythm of her breathing filling the dark. I lay awake. The forest outside was quiet. Too quiet. I strained my ears for the usual nighttime sounds, crickets, owls, the wind through the trees, but all I caught was silence. Then, faintly through the thin RV walls, static. I froze. The radio was off. I'd switched it off. But the sound was there, crawling just beneath the edge of hearing. I slid out of bed, careful not to wake Marla, and crept to the cab. The dash stereo was dark, power light off, but the speakers hummed with faint white noise. Frank? The voice slipped through the static. My name. I turned the dial with shaking fingers. The noise swelled, then cleared, and for a moment the child's voice was sharp as glass. Don't let them in. Then silence. The radio went dead. When I woke, Marla was already outside, sipping coffee in her camp chair, the morning sun cutting through the trees. I joined her, trying to shake the fog in my head. You were tossing and turning all night, she said. Bad dreams? I started to nod, then stopped. Did you hear anything? On the radio? She raised an eyebrow. I was asleep, Frank. I let it go. No point worrying her. But when I glanced around the park, I noticed something odd. The airstream was gone. Not packed up. Not driven out. Just gone. The gravel pad where it had sat was empty, no tire tracks, no sign it had ever been there. I told myself maybe they left early. But a knot had already started forming in my gut. And that was before the static came back. By mid-morning, the park looked normal again. Birds chattered, kids rode bikes between the gravel paths, and the host was making her rounds in a golf cart. Marla busied herself with breakfast, eggs, bacon, strong coffee, and I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. A bad dream, a trick of the radio. But the quiet nagged at me. Every so often I'd catch the faintest hiss under the normal sounds. A rustle in the trees that didn't quite match the wind. The buzz of the power hookup carrying something else in its current. And when I leaned close to the kitchen outlet to plug in the toaster, I swore I heard it whisper. Still here. The prongs sparked as I yanked my hand back. What was that? Marla asked from the stove. Bad connection, I lied. My throat felt dry. Need to check the breaker later. She frowned but let it drop. Around lunchtime, a man from Site 12 strolled over. Big guy, maybe mid-50s, with a scruffy beard and a faded Marine Corps ball cap. Morning, he said, extending a hand. Name's Curtis. Frank, I said, shaking it firmly. This is my wife, Marla. He grinned at her, then leaned on the picnic table. First time here? Yeah, I said. Nice spot. Curtis chuckled. Nice enough. Though you hear some weird stuff at night if you listen close. I froze, heart kicking. What kind of weird stuff? Oh, you know. Static. Voices. Old-timers around here say the valley's got some kind of echo. He shrugged. Personally, I think it's just busted radios bouncing signals around. Marla shot me a look. I forced a laugh. Guess I'll keep my dial tuned to music then. But inside I was rattled. If Curtis had heard it too, then I wasn't losing my mind. That night, after a campfire and a couple glasses of wine, Marla fell asleep early. I stayed up, staring at the glow of the power indicator on the microwave. Sure enough, around 11 p.m. the static crept back. This time it wasn't just the radio. It was everywhere. The microwave hummed with it. The fridge compressor hissed in rhythm. Even the little battery clock by the bed buzzed faintly. I sat frozen, listening. Frank? The child's voice bled through the appliances, soft but distinct. They're coming closer. The hairs on my arms rose. I grabbed the stereo knob and cranked it, the speakers hissing to life. Who are you? I whispered. The reply came sharp, urgent. Don't let them in. Whatever you do, don't open the door. Then silence. Not a minute later, something rapped against the RV door. 3 quick knocks. Marla stirred, mumbling in her sleep. My heart thundered. I edged to the door, pressing an eye to the peephole. Nothing. Just the gravel pad, bathed in moonlight. Then, another knock. Louder this time. Frank? A voice called softly. It was Marla's voice. But Marla was asleep in the bed behind me. My hands trembled as I gripped the handle. The radio popped again, the child's voice urgent. Don't. It's not her. I staggered back, chest tight, staring at the thin door that separated me from whatever was outside. The knocking stopped, and for a long time the silence was worse. When dawn came, I stepped outside, bleary-eyed and shaking. Site 12, Curtis's spot, was empty. No truck. No fifth wheel. No picnic table clutter. Like he'd never been there. I hurried to the host's office. Excuse me, I said, forcing calm. Did the folks from Site 12 check out already? She looked puzzled. Site 12's been empty all week. My stomach dropped. No, I spoke with him yesterday. Big guy. Ball cap. Her brow furrowed deeper. Sir, I think you must be mistaken. Nobody's been in 12 since last Saturday. I walked back in a daze. The site was bare, untouched gravel. Not even tire marks. Marla caught me staring and asked what was wrong. I almost told her. Almost. But the words stuck in my throat. Because I realized if I admitted what I'd seen, I'd have to admit I believed it. That afternoon, I dug out the CB radio I'd packed for emergencies. Maybe I could catch a signal, something that would explain all this. I rigged the antenna, powered it on, and spun through the channels. At first, just static. Then, Channel 19 crackled to life. Frank? I froze. They're here now. Don't open the door tonight. My hands went cold. Who are you? I whispered into the mic. The voice trembled. My name is Sam. I can't get out. Please don't let them take you too. The channel went dead. I stared at the radio for a long time, pulse hammering in my ears. Because what chilled me most wasn't the plea for help. It was the way the voice had come through clear as day. No static. No distortion. Like Sam was sitting right next to me. By the third night, I stopped pretending nothing was wrong. Marla could see it in me, the way I jumped at every noise, the way I stared too long at the radio. She finally put her hand on mine over dinner and said, Frank, you're scaring me. I wanted to tell her everything. About Curtis. About Sam's voice on the CB. About the knocks at the door. But before I could, the microwave beeped. Neither of us had touched it. The display blinked. 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock over and over, though the power hadn't gone out. Marla frowned. That's odd. I got up slowly, watching as the numbers glitched into nonsense symbols. Then, just for a second, the green segments formed a single word. Hello. The screen went dark. Marla let out a nervous laugh. Probably a power surge. But I saw the way her hands shook. Later, while brushing my teeth, I glanced at the bathroom mirror. My reflection stared back, except it didn't move with me. When I raised my toothbrush, the reflection's hand twitched too slow, lagging like a bad video. Its mouth opened wider than mine, too wide, as if stretching into a grin. My breath caught. Behind the reflection I saw a small shape. A child's silhouette standing in the shower stall. I spun around, nothing there. When I looked back, the reflection was normal again. I nearly dropped the toothbrush. That night the static came earlier. We were sitting together, lights dimmed, when the stereo hummed on by itself. Cold, the voice whispered. Marla froze. Frank, did you hear that? Her face was pale, eyes wide. I swallowed hard. Yeah. They're outside. Marla grabbed my arm. What is this? Before I could answer, a sharp bang rattled the RV wall. Then another. Like fists pounding the aluminum skin. The voice crackled louder. Don't let them in. Marla whimpered, clutching my sleeve. Frank, someone's out there. I stood, every nerve on fire, staring at the thin door. The pounding stopped. Silence. And then, laughter. High, thin, and childlike. Marla's nails dug into my arm. In the morning, Site 10 was empty. A family had been there. A couple with 2 little girls. I remembered them riding bikes the day before. Their camper was gone. No tracks. No bikes. No sign they'd ever existed. Marla saw it too. She turned to me, voice trembling. Frank, where are they? I couldn't answer. We went to the host again. Site 10? She repeated, tilting her head. Nobody's in 10 right now. Marla's face went white. No, they were right there. The family. You checked them in yesterday. The host frowned, flipping through her clipboard. Ma'am, I don't have any record of that. Marla grabbed my arm, pulling me away. Her voice was tight, almost breaking. It's happening to other people too, isn't it? I didn't want to say yes, but we both knew. That afternoon, I powered on the CB again. Sam, I said, are you there? Static hissed then. Frank, you need to leave. Tonight. Tell me what's happening, I demanded. They come through the static. At first you only hear them. Then you see them. Then. The channel warped with screeches, cutting him off. Then what, Sam? I shouted. Then they wear you. The line went dead. My hands shook as I set the mic down. That night, Marla and I sat in the dark, every light off, waiting. The static rose like a tide, filling the RV until it felt like it was in our bones. Let us in, voices layered, dozens at once. The windows fogged, though it wasn't cold. Shapes pressed against the glass. Hands, faces, mouths opening too wide. One of them looked like Curtis. Another like the woman from the Airstream. And one looked like the father from Site 10, his eyes empty, his mouth stretching in a scream I couldn't hear. Marla sobbed, covering her face. This isn't real. This isn't real. The stereo clicked and Sam's voice cut through the chaos. Hold on. Don't open the door. Dawn drives them back. The RV shook with pounding fists. The microwave display blinked again. Let us in. The voices outside screamed. And then silence. The static cut out in an instant. The glass cleared. We sat frozen, clinging to each other, waiting for the next blow. But none came. When the sun rose, the park looked normal again. Birds sang. The air was crisp. Kids laughed somewhere in the distance. But I knew better. Marla stared at me with hollow eyes. We have to go, Frank. Today. Now. I nodded. But as I turned to start the RV, I noticed something carved into the gravel pad outside our door. Words etched by a finger, shallow but unmistakable. Stay. We packed before the sun was fully up. No breakfast, no coffee, just threw things into cupboards, slammed shut drawers, and locked everything down. Marla's hands shook so badly she dropped 2 mugs. They shattered, but neither of us stopped to clean them. We're getting out of here, Frank, she said, voice clipped, desperate. I nodded, firing up the RV. The diesel grumbled awake, steady, comforting. We rolled out of Site 14 and down the gravel road, past the empty spaces, past the host's little shed. She stood outside, clipboard in hand, smiling as if it was just another beautiful morning. Marla muttered, "Don't look at her." I didn't. I just drove. The road wound through the valley pines, morning light spilling golden through the branches. For the first time in days I felt a flicker of hope. But after 15 minutes, we passed the host's shed again. I slammed the brakes. Gravel spat under the tires. Marla gasped. No. We had driven in a loop. The host smiled, lifting her hand in a little wave. I floored it. We drove straight through the valley, ignoring the speed limit signs, the picnic areas, the trailheads. Marla kept whispering, "Don't stop. Don't stop." 30 minutes later we came around a bend. And there was the host's shed again. The clipboard. The smile. The wave. Marla screamed, "We're not leaving, are we?" I gritted my teeth. "We'll try again. Another way." But we both knew. The valley wasn't letting us out. That night, after another day trapped in the same cursed campground, I tried the CB again. "Sam," I said, voice raw, "tell me how to get out." For a long while, only static. Then a different voice, slow and heavy, broke through. "You don't get out." Marla stared at me wide-eyed. The voice was deeper than Sam's, older, like gravel scraping metal. "You only last, or you wear." The channel cracked with shrieks, then cut to silence. I set the mic down with trembling hands. Marla whispered, "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. That night, the pounding came harder. Hands slapped against the RV walls, dozens of them rattling the windows. Through the blinds, shapes pressed close. Pale faces, mouths stretched wide. Eyes like empty sockets. One of them looked like Marla. Her own face stared back at her through the glass, lips moving silently. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "Make it stop, Frank. Please make it stop." The microwave beeped. Its green display flickered. "Let her out." I ripped the cord from the wall. The display stayed lit. "Let her out." The pounding grew frantic, as if the whole valley pressed against us. Then Sam's voice. "They'll try to take her first. Don't let them." The voices outside screamed louder. Marla clutched me, whispering, "Don't open the door, don't open the door." I held her tight. But part of me could feel it, the pressure, the pull. Like the valley itself wanted me to give her up. By morning everything was still. Birds sang. A squirrel darted across the gravel. Our RV looked untouched. No dents, no prints, no fog on the glass. But Marla wasn't the same. She sat by the window, staring blankly, lips moving in silence. I crouched beside her. "Marla?" She turned slowly. Her eyes were hollow, ringed dark like she hadn't slept in weeks. "They're waiting," she whispered. My heart sank. That afternoon, the CB crackled to life. "Frank, listen." Sam's voice, weak but urgent. "Tell me how to get out." I begged. "You can't. The valley keeps what it wants." "Then how are you talking to me?" Silence. Then, because I didn't leave either. My blood ran cold. Sam wasn't outside. He wasn't alive. He was in the static. But you can still fight it. Fire. Light. They hate it. It's why they come at night. The channel warped again. "But she's already marked, Frank. You won't save her." I slammed the mic down. "Shut up." Marla turned from the window, eyes black as tar for a split second before blinking normal again. I stumbled back, heart hammering. That night, I built a fire in the campground pit. Sam had said they hated light. Maybe it would protect us. Flames leapt, crackling high. I sat outside with the shotgun across my lap, watching the tree line. Shapes moved in the dark, just beyond the firelight. Dozens of them. They circled, pacing, never stepping closer. The fire held them back. But when I turned, I saw Marla standing in the doorway of the RV. Her face was lit orange by the flames. Her eyes were wrong again. Frank, she said softly. It's okay. We can let them in. I raised the gun without thinking. My hands shook so hard the barrel wavered. Marla, that's not you. She tilted her head, smiled too wide. Don't you love me, Frank? My finger tightened on the trigger. The shapes in the trees pressed closer, shrieking. The fire guttered low. The flames hissed and cracked, my only shield against the shapes circling in the treeline. They were clearer now, faces I recognized. Curtis. The family from Site 10. Even the Airstream woman. All of them pale, empty-eyed, mouths gaping like torn masks. They moved like marionettes, jerky and stiff, but their eyes never left me. Behind me, Marla's voice purred from the RV doorway. Frank, they're not here to hurt us. They just want in. Don't you feel it? The pull? I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the fire, kept feeding it wood, kept the shotgun steady across my lap. Stay back, I said, voice shaking. She laughed softly. Not Marla's laugh. Too high, too sweet, like a child imitating her. You think fire saves you? It only slows us. Everything burns down eventually. I risked a glance at her. Her eyes were black voids again, swallowing the firelight. Her smile stretched impossibly wide. For a moment, her skin rippled, like something inside was pushing against it. And then, Marla's face flickered, like static across a screen. Her features broke apart, jittering between hers and something else. Hollow-eyed, grinning. They wear us, Sam had said. Now I understood. The static didn't just take people. It hollowed them out, made them vessels. Marla wasn't just marked. She was being worn. I aimed the shotgun at her chest. Fight it, Marla. Please. You're stronger than this. Her face flickered again, just long enough for her real eyes to shine through, wet and terrified. Frank, help me. Then gone again, replaced by the grin. The fire sputtered low, the wood almost gone. Shapes in the dark pressed closer, shrieking with static voices. The air itself buzzed like 1,000 radios out of tune. I shoved the last log into the pit, but it wasn't enough. The flames sank, shadows crawling in. Marla stepped closer, still smiling. You can't fight forever. You'll wear to. It's easier if you stop fighting. Her skin rippled again, the thing inside stretching her like a glove. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just raised the gun, tears blurring my eyes. God forgive me, I whispered, and pulled the trigger. The blast lit the night. Marla's body jerked, then crumpled, half in shadow, half in firelight. For a moment, the shapes in the trees froze. Then they screamed, a chorus of static and fury, rushing the circle of light. I dropped the shotgun, grabbed the jerrycan from the RV, and doused the fire pit. Gasoline hissed, flames roaring up in a sudden inferno. The shrieking shapes recoiled, the heat pushing them back. Some burst apart in the light, dissolving into static smoke. I stood there, face burning from the heat, staring at Marla's still form. Her eyes opened. Not black now. Not void. Just hers. Frank, she croaked. I fell to my knees beside her, choking on tears. I'm sorry, baby. I didn't know what else. Her hand gripped mine, cold as ice. Burn it all. Then she went limp. The flames roared higher, devouring wood, grass, gasoline. I stumbled back toward the RV. Shapes swirled in the smoke, screaming, clawing, unable to reach me through the blaze. Inside, the microwave blinked again, words forming on the green display. You can't leave. I yanked the power cord again, still it glowed. You're already ours. The stereo screeched with static. Voices layered on top of one another, all familiar. Marla, Curtis, the girls, the Airstream woman, even my own. You'll wear, Frank. You'll wear. I snapped. I grabbed another can of gas, sloshed it through the RV, over the counters, the seats, the curtains. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. If the valley wanted to wear me, it was going to choke on ash. I lit the match. The RV went up like a torch. Flames licked through curtains, cracked windows, roared into the night sky. The valley screamed with it. The shapes shrieked, static exploding in waves so loud my teeth rattled. The ground itself vibrated, a deep rumble like an earthquake. Pines groaned, splitting, sap boiling in the heat. Through the smoke I saw them burning, faces twisting, bodies collapsing into ash, sucked back into the static. I staggered into the clearing, shotgun in one hand, firelight in my eyes. Marla's body was gone. Only black ash where she'd lain. By dawn, everything was gone. The fire smoldered low, the RV a husk of twisted metal. No shapes. No static. No voices. The valley was silent. I stood there, blackened with soot, hands blistered, eyes raw, waiting for it to start again. But it didn't. The road out was clear. When I drove, I didn't loop. I didn't see the host shed. Just trees. Mountains. Freedom. I didn't stop until I hit a diner 2 hours north. Sat there with black coffee, hands still shaking, eyes bloodshot. The waitress asked if I was all right. I said yes. I lied. I didn't tell her about the static, the shapes, the way Marla's face had flickered. Didn't tell her about the fire. Didn't tell her that when I closed my eyes, I still hear the voices. You'll wear, Frank? I just drank my coffee and drove on. But the static follows me. Every motel TV fuzzes for a second before the channels come in. Every radio crackles before music starts. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear her voice in it. Frank, help me. 3 days after the fire, I checked into a roadside motel off I-80. The kind with flickering neon and carpet that smells like cigarettes. I hadn't slept since leaving the valley. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marla's face flicker between hers and that grinning hollow mask. The room had a little TV bolted to the dresser. Old tube style. When I clicked it on, the screen went to static before the channels came in. I shut it off immediately. Instead, I sat on the bed in the dark, shotgun across my lap, and listened. At 3:07 a.m., the phone rang. I stared at it, heart hammering. When I picked up, there was only static on the line. Then, her voice. Frank? I dropped the receiver like it burned me. By morning, 2 men were waiting outside my room. Black suits, clean shoes, government look. One of them smiled too politely. Mr. Pritchard? I froze. The other lifted a badge I didn't recognize. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a fire in Elk Valley Park. My mouth went dry. They gestured toward a black SUV. Please. It won't take long. Inside, the air smelled like leather and ozone. The windows were tinted too dark. The polite one turned to me. You saw something in the valley, didn't you? I didn't answer. He leaned closer. We call it residual interference. You might call it static. My stomach dropped. The other man added, it's not the first incident. And it won't be the last. They asked me about the voices, the shapes, the way the valley looped the road. They asked about Marla. Every question was precise, clinical, like they already knew the answers but wanted to see if I'd confirm them. Finally, I snapped. What the hell are they? The polite man steepled his fingers. Think of reality like a radio band, he said. Most people stay tuned to the same frequency. But in places like Elk Valley, he smiled thinly, the dial drifts. His partner added, something is always listening on the other end. And when the frequency lines up just right, it bleeds through. My skin crawled. Bleeds through? You mean the things wearing people? Neither of them denied it. When they finally let me out, the polite one gave me a card. No name. No number. Just a symbol, embossed in silver. A circle split by static lines. If the interference follows you, he said, call us. But understand, he leaned in, voice low. You're already compromised. The SUV drove off, leaving me in the motel parking lot with the card trembling in my hand. I tried to keep moving. One town to the next, never stopping long. At a gas station outside Reno, the clerk gave me a funny look as I paid. Hey, he said, you been camping in Elk Valley? I froze. Why? He nodded at the little TV on the counter. It was on channel 3, static hissing faintly. Through the fuzz, a face flickered. Marla's face. The clerk tilted his head. Because that static's been following you since you walked in. That night, in yet another motel, I turned on the CB out of habit. Static roared immediately. And then, a voice. Not Sam this time. Not Marla. Not anyone I knew. Just a flat, hollow tone. Frank Pritchard, we see you? The hairs on my neck stood up. You can burn the valley, but you can't burn the signal. It travels. It grows. And now, you carry it. The stereo cut out. The microwave blinked on by itself. Hello again. I stared at the glowing green letters, my own reflection warped in the glass. I thought of Marla's last words, burn it all. Maybe that's what I had to do. Not just the RV. Not just the valley. Maybe the only way to stop it was to take myself with it. I picked up the shotgun, sat on the edge of the bed, and pressed the barrel under my chin. My finger tightened. Then the TV flicked on by itself. Marla's voice filled the room. Frank, don't. I froze, tears burning down my face. Her face appeared in the static. Not grinning. Not hollow. Just her. Fight it, she whispered. Don't let them win. The screen went black. I didn't pull the trigger. I don't know if it was really her or just another trick. But I'm still here. Still moving from town to town, never staying long. The static follows me. TVs fuzz when I walk past. Radios hiss my name between songs. Phones ring at 3:07 a.m. sharp. And sometimes, in the hum of it, I hear a voice that isn't cruel. Her voice. Keep fighting. So I do. For now. I'd been driving for 7 hours when the mountains opened up, spilling us into a valley that felt like it had been forgotten by the rest of Colorado. Pine ridges sloped down into a basin so still it looked painted onto the earth. A lake stretched flat and silver at the center. Resonance Lake, Kendra read from the thin green line on our map app. Her phone was useless out here. No signal, no data, but she still checked it every 10 minutes like maybe the mountains would change their minds and let LTE through. Jake leaned forward between the driver and passenger seats, grinning like a kid. Man, this is perfect. No other campers, no noise, just us. Finally. He wasn't wrong. The RV rattled as I steered it down the cracked asphalt road, weeds splitting through the pavement. No other vehicles. No signs of other campers. Just pine, granite, and that mirror-flat lake catching the last of the evening sun. The campground was little more than a dirt loop carved into the tree line, with a handful of numbered posts. At the entrance stood a ranger station, small, weathered, and locked tight. The windows were dark. A hand-painted sign leaned against the door. Pay cash in box. Keep quiet after dark. That was it. No instructions. No warnings about bears, fire bans, or checkout times. Just those 4 words, keep quiet after dark. Jake chuckled when he read it. Spooky. Guess Bigfoot's on night shift. Kendra didn't laugh. She shoved her hands deeper into her hoodie and stared at the water. Looks weird, doesn't it? I followed her gaze. She wasn't wrong. The lake was too still. Not a ripple, not a breeze across the surface. Even the air felt heavy, muffled, like sound didn't carry right. I shook it off. I'd been the one pushing for this trip. A week unplugged, away from the city, away from work, away from everything. We'd spent years talking about finally taking the RV out west, and I wasn't going to let an empty campground spook us. We'll pay the box, pick a spot, and crack open a beer, I said. That's the whole point. Silence, stars, and nothing to worry about. Jake clapped me on the shoulder. Now you're talking. We fed a few bills into the rusted metal box, picked site number 6, and parked the RV in the shade of towering pines. The trees leaned close together, their branches blotting out most of the sky, but the lake glowed silver through the gaps. By the time we'd set up, camp chairs unfolded, fire pit stacked with wood, cooler cracked open. The sun was sinking behind the ridgeline. A pale blue twilight spread across the valley, soft and strangely muted. Even our voices seemed dampened, like someone had wrapped the world in cotton. Jake raised his beer. To being off the grid. We clinked cans. The sound rang flat, swallowed by the trees. Kendra hugged her knees in her chair. Does it sound weird to you guys? Jake smirked. Everything sounds weird to you. No, I mean, she snapped her fingers. The echo bounced back, sharp and clear, but delayed. Like someone had recorded the sound and played it back 3 seconds later. We all froze. Jake snapped his fingers too. The sound repeated. Same delay. Same faint, tinny echo rolling across the lake. I laughed, forced maybe, but it came out. Just the mountains. Acoustics are strange out here. Kendra didn't look convinced. She kept staring at the lake as if it might answer for itself. That was the first time I noticed it. The surface didn't just reflect. Remembered. Night fell fast. Pine shadows stretched long across the dirt loop of the campground, blackening as the sun disappeared behind the peaks. The lake had gone from silver to an oily, ink-dark black, reflecting nothing but the faint orange of our small fire. We sat in our camp chairs, the RV's lights off, letting the fire do the work. Smoke curled in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of charred pine and wood. Kendra poked at the embers with a stick, sighing. It's too quiet, she said. Jake laughed, but it didn't carry far. Quiet's the whole point, right? I leaned back, listening. And that's when I noticed it. The sound of our voices from earlier, not just echoing across the lake, but returning altered. Kendra had muttered something when we were setting up, just a small complaint about mosquitoes. I didn't pay attention. But now the sound drifted back across the water, a whisper. Why won't they leave us alone? I froze. Kendra? I asked. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the water. Jake chuckled nervously. Must be the wind, right? But the wind had died hours ago. The lake's surface was still, flat as glass. And the whisper came again, slower this time. Why won't they leave us alone? It wasn't her voice. Not entirely. It had the same cadence, but something beneath it was wrong. Hollow. Distorted. Kendra stood abruptly. I'm going to bed. I can't. This is wrong. I wanted to say something, reassure her. But when I opened my mouth, a laugh escaped. Ours from earlier in the day, and then it echoed back at me from the lake, slow and warped, like someone stretched it over hours. Jake's grin vanished. Okay. That's not funny anymore. I tried to distract myself, rummaging through the RV's cabinets. In the corner, under a pile of old maps, I found a CB radio, dusty and forgotten. The thing had a thick antenna and a large orange push-to-talk button. I clicked it on. Static. Only static, deep and low, humming almost like a voice if you tried hard enough to listen. I fiddled with the knobs, tuning the frequency. Then, faintly, I heard something. A voice. Don't trust reflection. I jumped back. Jake's brow furrowed. What? Who's talking? Static crackled. The words repeated. Don't trust reflection. Kendra, pale, whispered, I told you something was wrong. I can feel it. I tried to call back, pressed the button. My own voice hissed and warped across the lake. It repeated, slow, wrong. It's not safe. The static grew louder, almost responding as if the lake itself was listening. We tried to sleep, but the lake wouldn't let us. Around midnight, Jake stirred first. He pointed, voice trembling, the water. Someone's walking. I followed his gaze. On the far side of the lake, I thought I saw movement. A man walking along the water's surface. His steps made no ripples, no sound. The firelight didn't touch him, yet he was there, clear as day. Kendra gasped. That's impossible. The figure stopped and turned slowly toward us. I blinked. There was no face, only a blank, pale void. Then it dissolved into the blackness of the water. The CB sputtered to life again. Faint, garbled voices whispered over the static. They remember. They remember. And then silence. We packed the fire down, pulled into the RV and locked the doors. The hum of the lake outside seemed to seep into the walls. Every creak, every wind whistle sounded amplified, unnatural. I stared at the window, seeing the water reflect nothing but shadows. Yet in those shadows I thought I saw 1,000 mirrored shapes staring back. Somewhere in the distance, across the lake, a voice called my name. I swear it was Kendra's, though she was shaking beside me. The RV's lights flickered, and for a moment the static on the sea became alive, almost like it had a heartbeat. They never leave. I shivered, pressed the radio to my ear, but it went silent. The first night ended without violence, without movement, but I didn't sleep. Not a minute. Because the lake remembered. And the lake was listening. The morning after the first night, the lake seemed almost ordinary. Flat, black water reflecting pine trees and morning light. Sunlight glittered across the surface like diamonds. But the memory of the echoes lingered. Kendra refused to speak much. She hovered near the RV door, hands clutching her hoodie like a talisman. Jake tried to laugh it off, but even he didn't look at the water directly. I decided to explore the shoreline, partly to shake the tension and partly to see if the walking man from the night before was real. The sand along the edge was smooth, untouched, except for a line of dead fish. Small trout, their scales iridescent in the morning light. Nothing about them looked decomposed. In fact, they seemed unnaturally preserved, as if frozen in time. I bent down and touched one. Cold, stiff, but it didn't smell. No decay, no rot. Kendra stepped closer, whispering, "Why are they here?" "I don't know," I said, voice tight. "Something's wrong with this lake." Jake, ever the skeptic, picked one up and flicked it back into the water. It floated, perfectly still, its eyes unblinking, staring at us. I shivered. They're watching somehow. That night we tried to keep quiet, sit still, pretend the lake was harmless. It wasn't. At first it was subtle. Our whispers echoed back, delayed, slightly warped. Then our own words began to shift. Small phrases, things we hadn't said. Kendra whispered, "I think someone's out there." And the echo returned. "I think I can see you." Jake shouted, laughing nervously, "Stop messing with us." The lake answered, "Stop laughing now." I grabbed the CB again, tuning desperately, hoping to intercept a frequency we didn't understand. Static filled the cabin, low hum undercutting everything. Then faintly a voice. "They're not safe, don't go near." I froze. The words were familiar, echoing the same phrasing Sam Huxley had used over that old CB in Wolf Creek. By the third night, the lake grew bold. Jake wandered out for water and never returned. At first I thought he was joking. Kendra's panicked cries confirmed he was gone. We ran to the shoreline. Nothing. Just black water, still as glass. And then the whispers came from the lake itself. "Come, Jake, come to us." A cold wind rolled off the water. Mist curled upward, thickening, forming tendrils that reached toward us like fingers. Kendra screamed. I grabbed her, pulling her back to the RV. The CB sparked to life. "You can't leave, not him, not yet." I knew then. The lake didn't just echo. It took. Through the RV window I saw something impossible. Jake, standing on the surface of the lake, walking toward the RV. But his steps didn't disturb the water. His face was pale, eyes hollow. I opened the door to call to him. "Keep away." Kendra shrieked. I stepped back, realizing he wasn't real. It was a reflection. A thin, warped version of him, the lake trying to pull him, and maybe us, in. I slammed the door. The reflection stopped, rippling as if trying to escape the glassy surface. Then he disappeared, leaving only the black mirror behind. We stayed locked in, huddled together until the early hours. Then the CB radio crackled again. Clearer this time. Sam Huxley's voice bled through the static. The lake is a thin space, a reflection of the world beyond. Don't let them cross. The reflection kills, but it also learns. Beware the voice. My stomach turned. Thin space, just like Mirror Lake. The lake wasn't just strange. It was a doorway, a thin boundary between our world and whatever lay beyond, and it was testing us. By dawn, we decided we couldn't stay. The RV had to move. But the lake wasn't done with us. Every mirror, every shiny surface in the RV reflected movement not there. Shadows shifting across walls, whispers in the radio static, glimpses of figures walking across the lake even as it lay calm. I grabbed the CB again, trying to speak. Static roared back, then a single clear phrase. Aaron, you carry the signal now. The air grew thick, almost tactile, pressing against our skin. Kendra clutched my arm. We have to go now. I started the engine. The tires crunched on the gravel. The lake stretched endlessly beside us, silver in morning light, whispering and static filled. I didn't look back. The next night, the air turned heavy, almost metallic. Mist rose off the lake like a living thing, curling in thick tendrils toward our RV. Every sound seemed muffled, yet amplified at the same time, our own voices distorted, echoing in ways that made my stomach churn. Jake hadn't returned. I kept expecting him to stumble out of the woods, grinning, alive, but that hope faded as darkness crept closer. Kendra sat silently, trembling. Her eyes never left the black mirror of the water. I heard it first as a low hum under the static of the CB, barely audible at first but growing, vibrating in my chest. Aaron, come to us. I froze. It was Jake's voice. Distorted, hollow, and unmistakably him. The mist swirled faster, curling around the RV's tires and doors, seeping inside in fine threads. I reached for the door, but Kendra grabbed my arm. You can't go out there. He's not really him. I knew she was right. The lake had learned. It could mimic voices. It could replicate appearances. But the pull was irresistible, magnetic. Something was reaching out, not just to Jake, but to all of us. Suddenly, the ground beneath the RV shivered, the tires vibrating as if the lake itself had grown under us. I turned toward the window. Mist shifted, and there he was, Jake, stepping onto the water, calm and deliberate, his figure impossibly clear. Jake, I shouted. Kendra grabbed me, screaming, but I couldn't look away. His reflection. No, it wasn't reflection. It was him, mirrored perfectly but wrong in subtle ways. Fingers too long. Eyes glimmering with an unnatural blackness. Before I could react, the surface of the lake surged like liquid glass. Jake's form was pulled downward, leaving only ripples behind. His scream echoed in my mind as if the lake had swallowed his soul. Kendra screamed, but it was already too late. Hours later, alone, I sat trembling in the RV. I hadn't slept. Every mirror, every shiny surface reflected movement not there. The lake outside shimmered, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries, trees growing at wrong angles, skies bending in unnatural curves, shadows crawling across the water like living things. I realized the truth. The lake wasn't just water. It was a thin space, a barrier between worlds. The dead fish, the echoes, Jake's disappearance, all part of the lake learning, testing, pulling. I had to know. Grabbing a flashlight, I stepped outside, moving slowly toward the shore. Mist curled around me like fingers. The lake reflected everything, the RV, the trees, but behind the reflections, another place shimmered. A world almost like ours, but wrong, pale light, twisted shapes, and movement that made no sense. And then I saw him. Jake. Not alive, not dead. Suspended between worlds. His eyes were the void of the lake itself, staring directly at me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. He, or it, spoke, voice warped and layered, more than one speaking at once. You see now. You carry the signal, join us. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The thin space reflected me too. My own reflection moved independently, reaching out toward the lake. I ran back to the RV, slamming the door. The CB crackled to life again, static heavy but clearer than before. The lake learns from the taken. Copies. Waits. Do not follow. The lake hissed, almost alive, pulling at the edges of the world, warping the trees' reflections, stretching them impossibly. Mist thickened, moving in patterns that mimic human forms, all reaching toward the RV. I understood then. If it learned from those it took, then staying still, staying quiet wouldn't be enough. Wanted more. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it across the water. The reflection of the lake shimmered violently, like a heat mirage reversed. Shapes formed in the mist, tall, humanoid, faceless. I caught glimpses of Jake among them, twisted and warped. I screamed at them to stop. My voice echoed, warped, distorted, returning from the lake in multiple overlapping tones. It didn't stop. The lake seemed to pulse with intent, sending waves of cold through the ground, through my bones, reaching into the RV. I realized then that the only way to survive was to break the signal, disrupt the connection between this world and the thin space. And the only thing I had left was the CB. I turned the knobs, spinning the dials through static and interference, hoping to jam the frequency, hoping to sever the lake's tether to us. You can't. The voice screamed through the static, and I felt the mist claw at my skin, cold and wet. I twisted the dials harder, spinning through every frequency, until the lake's reflection began to shimmer violently, ripples tearing through the stillness. The shapes in the mist screamed, or maybe it was just my mind hearing them. And then silence. The mist thinned. The lake went flat again. The echoes stopped. Jake was gone. The night was silent after I severed the signal. Too silent. The mist thinned to a low fog, curling along the ground but no longer forming humanoid shapes. The lake's surface flattened, reflecting the dim glow of my flashlight. But the air felt heavy like a held breath. I grabbed Kendra's hand. Her fingers were icy, shaking. Neither of us spoke. Words seemed useless now. The lake had taken Jake, but it had left a warning behind. A presence, a memory, a resonance that I could feel in my bones. We climbed into the RV, engine trembling as I turned the key. Tires crunched the gravel, carrying us slowly down the overgrown access road. The lake stretched alongside us, black and still, reflecting the pines and sky, but every so often I caught movement at its edge. A ripple, a shadow, a distorted reflection of us that didn't match our movements. The CB crackled one last time. Not voices, not static, just a low hum that vibrated the metal of the RV like a heartbeat. I slammed the knobs to off. Kendra whispered, Did we break it? I didn't answer. I couldn't be sure. The lake had taught me something. It was patient, it waited, and it remembered. The morning light barely touched the peaks as we drove. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The mist had cleared, the lake looked calm, benign even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it followed us, creeping silently through the trees, seeping into the air. We drove for hours without seeing another vehicle, another sign of life. GPS was useless, maps seemed wrong, even roads that should have existed ended in overgrowth or vanished entirely. Somewhere along the way, Kendra finally spoke. Do you think it's done with us? I swallowed hard. I don't know. I don't think it ever finishes. We stopped at a small diner late that afternoon, somewhere I could get a signal and call authorities. Nothing. No trace of Resonance Lake. No maps. Not a single mention online. It was as if it had never existed. I tried to speak about Jake. Tried to explain the whispers, the reflections, the thin space. But no one believed me. People nodded politely, murmured about grief, about hallucinations, about stress. And maybe that's what it wanted. A world where it could exist quietly, unseen, pulling one person at a time through the reflection. Months later, I still hear it. Not always. Not clearly. But sometimes, a whisper over static on an old radio, a strange echo in a quiet room, a reflection that moves slightly differently than I do. I know it's out there. Waiting. Learning. Reflecting. I avoid lakes now. Large bodies of still water make my skin crawl. Fog rising in the morning sends a chill that has nothing to do with temperature. And sometimes late at night when the wind is just right, I hear the voice. Not Jake. Not Kendra. Not even my own. Something else. Deep, resonant, patient. We remember. We wait. I can't forget. I don't think anyone ever does once they've seen what lies beneath the glassy surface. Resonance Lake isn't gone. It's just quiet. And quiet, I've learned, is when it's listening. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of asphalt unraveling into the wilderness, flanked on both sides by dense pine forests that seemed to lean closer the longer I drove. The sky above was a muted gray, the kind of pre-storm color that made the edges of reality feel sharper, more pronounced. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the hum of the RV's engine my only companion as the miles slipped beneath us. We were heading to Cedar Hollow State Park, a place my wife Laura had found online while researching weekend getaways for us. The reviews were glowing: quiet, secluded campsites, pristine lakes, and little in the way of other visitors. It sounded perfect. That's what made the unease creeping into my chest all the more frustrating. Something about the drive, the deep silence of the surrounding woods, tugged at a primal sense of caution I couldn't name. We pulled into the park just as the sun dipped behind the treeline, casting long shadows that pooled across the gravel lot. The air smelled of damp pine and earth, that unmistakable scent of untamed forest that instantly sharpens the senses. I parked the RV in the spot the ranger had pointed out over the phone earlier, a flat area near the edge of the woods, close enough to the lake for a view, far enough from other campers for solitude. Laura climbed down first, stretching. "This is perfect," she said, voice echoing faintly in the empty lot. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She was trying to shake off the same unease I felt. I nodded, stepping out myself, taking in the stillness. No birds, no wind rustling the trees, just a silence so complete it pressed against your eardrums. Even the distant hum of the highway seemed to fade as I looked toward the tree line. The ranger's map had made this spot look smaller, easier to navigate. In reality, the RV seemed swallowed by the vast forest. The lake glimmered faintly in the fading light, and I thought I saw movement on its surface. A ripple, a flicker, but the wind was still. Nothing should have moved. Inside the RV, we began setting up for the night. The familiar routines were supposed to be comforting. Arranging sleeping bags, prepping dinner, checking the propane and generator. But something felt off. Every sound, slamming cabinets, water running in the sink, echoed as if the RV itself were amplifying them. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, and for a second, I could swear the shadows in the corners of the room were stretching just slightly, leaning toward me. Laura laughed nervously. "It's just an old RV, Sam. These things creak." I nodded, forcing a smile, but I didn't shake the feeling. Even as I prepared our meal, I felt eyes, or something like them, watching from outside. Not human eyes. Something vast and patient, waiting beyond the thin metal walls. The evening passed slowly. We ate, talked quietly, and watched the lake fade into darkness. When I went to check the generator outside, I noticed something peculiar. The gravel path leading from the RV to the main park road looked subtly altered. Tire tracks from our arrival were misaligned, as if the RV had moved slightly without our noticing. I shook my head. "Probably just my eyes playing tricks," I muttered. Laura didn't see the tracks. She was unpacking supplies inside. By 10 p.m. we were ready for bed. I climbed into the driver's seat to check the RV one last time. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Not a rumble, not a click, just silence. "Laura, it won't start," I said, unease creeping into my voice. She came over, peering into the dash. "Maybe it's the battery? Or the generator?" I checked both. Everything was fine. Fuel, battery, everything normal. Yet the RV refused to move. "Maybe it's just a glitch," I said aloud, more to convince myself than her. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. Not at all. That night, sleep came fitfully. Every creak, every sigh of the RV made me jump. Shadows moved across the walls of the cabin as if reacting independently to our presence. Outside, the lake seemed to shimmer unnaturally, reflecting shapes that didn't match anything around it. And in the farthest corner of my mind, I could swear I heard a soft voice whisper, "You can't leave." I bolted upright, heart hammering. Laura was still asleep, breathing evenly. Nothing had changed outside. Or had it? As I lay back down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the RV and the forest had noticed our arrival. That it wasn't just the silence, the shadows, or the flickering lights. Something was waiting, patient, watching. And for the first time, I understood that leaving would not be simple. The morning light brought little comfort. Sunlight filtered weakly through the pine canopy, making the forest seem darker than it should have been. I went to start the RV again. Turn the key. Nothing. No rumble, no whirring of the engine. Just the same dead silence from the day before. Laura appeared behind me, coffee in hand. "Maybe it's the ignition switch?" she suggested cautiously. I shook my head, checking each connection. Everything was fine. Mechanically, the RV was sound. And yet, it wouldn't respond. "Something's wrong," I muttered under my breath. I turned to the GPS, hoping at least it could give some guidance. The screen flickered, then displayed an unfamiliar map of the park. Trails we had walked yesterday were missing entirely, replaced by twisted paths that curved impossibly through the trees. The lake, which should have been directly west of our campsite, appeared multiple times on the map, sometimes hundreds of meters from its true location. "GPS can't be this bad," I said, feeling the first true pang of panic. Laura leaned over my shoulder. "Maybe the signal's weak?" "It's not weak," I said grimly. "It's lying." I double-checked the paper map. Trails and roads didn't match. Even landmarks were subtly shifted. Rocks that had been near the lake yesterday now appeared miles away on paper. The realization hit me slowly. The forest itself, or whatever influence it exerted, was warping reality. By midday, things began escalating. Shadows no longer behaved naturally. Inside the RV, corners darkened disproportionately. Reflections and mirrors flickered independently. For a moment, I caught sight of something outside the window, a figure standing at the treeline. Human shape, but unnervingly still. I blinked. It was gone. Laura noticed the tension. "Sam, you're scaring yourself," she said softly, though I caught a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I wanted to believe her. I tried. But then it happened again. The RV's exterior mirrors reflected the forest behind us, but in one, a shadow moved toward the RV, impossible to reconcile with the terrain. I turned, expecting to see a person or an animal, but the forest was empty. Walking toward the main campground to ask for help, I noticed something strange. Campsites that had been empty yesterday were now occupied, people milling about, but they didn't respond to sound. They moved mechanically, heads tilted unnaturally, shadows flickering at the edges of their bodies. One camper seemed to notice me, or perhaps my presence triggered the forest's attention. They stopped moving, turning their head fully toward me. Blackness where eyes should have been. Then, with a fluid motion that no human body could achieve, they disappeared behind a tree. I ran back to the RV. Laura, pale, waited inside. "Did you see that?" I asked. She nodded, shaking. I think I saw someone, but they didn't look right. Like they weren't really there." By late afternoon, the first whispers started. Soft, unintelligible at first, like wind through reeds. But as I sat in the RV trying to check the engine again, the whispers grew clearer, more insistent. They seemed to echo inside the RV as if emanating from the walls themselves. "Don't leave, stay, pay attention." I tried to block it, focusing on mechanical troubleshooting, but every tool I picked up felt impossibly heavy, every movement delayed as though the RV itself resisted my hands. Laura clutched my arm. "Sam, I can hear them too." I realized then that the forest, or the RV, was no longer external. It was affecting perception, thoughts, even our sense of reality. As night approached, the forest's influence intensified. The lake glimmered with unnatural light, ripples forming in patterns that defied physics. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, pooling in corners and against the RV. A distant shape moved across the campsite, tall, impossibly fluid, black as the void. Every attempt to leave was thwarted. The roads seemed to fold back on themselves. Trails led to the same campsite no matter the direction we took. It became terrifyingly clear. The RV was trapped, the forest surrounding us was alive, patient, waiting for our attention, feeding on our fear. "We're not leaving," I whispered. "Not tonight. And maybe, not ever." Laura held my hand, trembling. The forest seemed to exhale, a deep, rhythmic pulse vibrating through the ground. Shadows at the treeline moved in harmony with that pulse. And in the corner of my eye, I thought I saw the impossible. The reflection of the RV in the side mirror, floating slightly above the ground, as if the world itself refused to acknowledge our presence. We weren't just trapped. We were being observed, catalogued, and tested. The next morning brought no relief. The RV still refused to start, and the forest outside seemed to have thickened overnight, the trees pressing closer, their long shadows stretching unnaturally across the gravel. I could almost feel their weight leaning toward us, patient, waiting. Even with daylight, the distortions of reality grew. The gravel path I had walked yesterday now twisted unpredictably. Rocks and roots were out of place. Landmarks shifted subtly when I blinked. The forest had learned to toy with perception. I attempted to leave on foot to find help. I took the trail that should have led to the main road, but after 20 minutes of walking, I found myself standing in the same clearing by the RV. I checked my bearings. Everything matched the campsite perfectly. Nothing had changed, yet I had walked in a straight line for what felt like miles. Laura followed hesitantly behind me. "This doesn't make sense," she said, voice tight. "We've been walking for ages. How are we back here?" I swallowed hard. It's the forest, or something in it. It's folding space. We tried again, taking another path, counting paces, marking trees with chalk. Yet every attempt ended in the same disorienting loop. Time seemed elastic, stretching and contracting. Even the sun's position appeared inconsistent. Shadows cast by the trees sometimes fell opposite where logic demanded. Back at the RV, the mirrors and windows were no longer reliable. I noticed subtle changes. Reflections lagged behind movements by a second or two, then sometimes moved independently, mimicking gestures I hadn't made. One moment Laura was arranging supplies in the RV. The next, her reflection in the window held still, staring at me with eyes far darker than her own. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was fatigue. But when I turned to face the mirror fully, her reflection didn't blink. It smiled faintly. And then, slowly, deliberately, it raised its hand in a gesture that I had not made. Laura noticed it too. Her eyes widened in horror. "Sam, it's not her, it's not real." Through the distorted forest, faint figures appeared. Other campers who should have been distant or absent. At first they seemed normal, moving about as if oblivious. But when we tried to approach, the figures would freeze mid-step, then vanish entirely when we blinked. One moment, a family of 3 sat at a picnic table down the trail. The next, it was empty. The picnic table itself appeared in a slightly different spot. The forest was not only folding space, it was manipulating reality around us, reconfiguring the campsite and surroundings as if we were part of a living diorama. By late afternoon, the whispers returned, louder this time, penetrating even the daylight. They weren't just faint murmurs, they were intelligible, pressing against our thoughts. "Stay, do not leave, attention feeds us, observe." The words didn't come from outside or inside. They emanated from everywhere, from the trees, the RV, even our own minds. My heart pounded, but no amount of rationalization helped. The whispers fed on fear, curiosity, and attention itself. Laura clutched my arm, shivering. "I can hear them too." Sam, they're in our heads. I nodded, too tense to speak. The forest, or whatever presence controlled this RV, didn't need to chase us. It only needed our focus, our awareness. That was enough to bend reality. By evening, the RV itself began to betray subtle signs of sentience. Doors would lock or unlock on their own. The engine sometimes shuddered as though alive, groaning with unnatural resistance. We tried moving again. The tires rolled for a few feet, then stopped abruptly as though an invisible hand held them. I tried rocking the RV manually, pushing with all my strength. It moved slightly, then jerked back violently. Every motion we made felt measured, anticipated, countered by an unseen intelligence. Laura whispered in terror, "It's alive, Sam. It's the RV." I couldn't argue. Even as I fought to understand, the evidence was undeniable. The forest's influence had merged with the RV. The two were extensions of the same consciousness, a trap that fed on attention and fear. Night fell. The lake's surface reflected not the sky, but dark, rippling distortions. Shadows pooled at the corners of the RV, lengthening into impossible angles. The whispers became constant, relentless, as if the forest had settled into our minds completely. We huddled inside, the RV a fragile shell against the encroaching presence. Every sound, branches creaking, leaves shifting, distant water lapping, was amplified. Every flicker of light, every shadow became a threat. By midnight, exhaustion had made our thoughts sluggish. I could barely distinguish between the whispers, our own fears, and the forest's manipulations. One truth remained clear: we were trapped, and the forest, through the RV, would not allow us to leave on our own terms. By the next morning, exhaustion had sharpened every sensation. The forest outside the RV seemed to breathe, inhaling and exhaling with deliberate patience. The whispers never ceased. They were no longer faint murmurs. They had become a constant, pressing weight, filling every corner of my mind. Attention, focus, you can't leave, stay. Laura sat frozen in the passenger seat, her hands clenching the edge of the table. The flickering fluorescent light above us cast long, twitching shadows, distorting her features into something unrecognizable. The first hallucinations came subtly. A tent across the campsite, erected last night, appeared now in perfect clarity in the middle of the lake. Shadows of campers we hadn't seen, or that had vanished, walked in unnatural loops around the RV. When I reached the window to look closer, the water seemed to swirl, forming shapes that resembled faces, screaming silently, black voids where eyes should have been. My stomach churned. Laura whispered almost to herself, "They're showing us our fears." I wanted to disagree, to rationalize it, but the forest, or the RV, had begun feeding off our terror. Every heartbeat, every quick glance, every shadow we noticed strengthened its hold. By midday, reality bent even further. Inside the RV, I noticed objects changing places. Our packed backpacks had shifted. A kitchen knife now lay in the bedroom instead of the counter. Then came the memories. My thoughts felt invaded, as though the forest could read them. I saw Mike, my brother, dying in the hospital. I felt the rust creeping over my mental defenses, the guilt pressing down like a physical weight. Laura experienced similar visions. Shadows of her childhood home, distorted by fear, filled the RV walls. Objects from her past, forgotten toys, old photographs, materialized in impossible places, reflecting her deepest anxieties. The RV wasn't just alive, it had become a conduit for the forest's manipulation, feeding on our minds, using our fears to bend reality further. Desperation took over. We tried to drive the RV again. The engine sputtered, coughed, then failed entirely. The forest outside seemed to pulse in rhythm with our failed attempts. We tried leaving on foot. Every step led us back to the RV, the forest bending paths, reshaping terrain. Rocks, roots, and shadows shifted in real time, folding space to keep us confined. Even communication failed. Cell phones showed bars but no signal. Radios only emitted static interlaced with faint, whispering voices. Our attempts to call for help amplified the forest's awareness. It responded, manipulating perception, warping the RV, the campsite, and even our memories. Night fell again, darker than before. The lake reflected shapes that shouldn't exist, dark silhouettes moving beneath the water like something vast and predatory. The RV walls began to warp subtly. The wood and metal seemed to breathe, pulse, and expand as if alive. Shadows crept across the ceiling, pooling in corners, forming elongated shapes that twitched and shifted independently. Occasionally they took the forms of familiar people, lost friends, family, but with eyes like empty voids. Laura sobbed quietly. I can't do this anymore. I gripped her hand. We have to stay awake. We have to remember what's real. But the line between real and illusion had blurred. Every whisper, every reflection, every shifting shadow questioned our sanity. The forest had begun to control our perception entirely. By midnight I understood the truth. The RV was no longer just a vehicle. It was a trap, a living extension of the forest. It absorbed our attention, bent reality, and magnified our fears. The whispers were its voice, its way of feeding. The forest outside was patient. It didn't need to chase. It only needed to wait until we reached the point where fear could override rationality. Every failed attempt to leave, every distorted shadow, every hallucination tightened the invisible chains around us. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. You cannot leave. Attention feeds us. We see you. Laura and I huddled together, trembling. Outside, the shadows in the forest seemed to lean closer, dark shapes pressing against the RV as if the very trees were alive, watching, waiting. And in the reflection of the side mirror, I saw it. A tall, impossibly thin figure with black void eyes, standing just beyond the tree line, perfectly still. Stay. The whisper was everywhere, in our minds, in the air, in the RV itself. And we had no choice but to obey for now. The night pressed down on us like a living weight. The lake reflected nothing of the moon or stars, only a black, undulating void. Outside, the forest had shifted again. Trees leaned toward the RV, shadows pooling and stretching unnaturally across the gravel. Laura and I clung together inside, shivering, listening to the whispers that had become impossible to ignore. Attention feeds us. You cannot leave. Stay. Every sound, the creak of metal, the snap of a twig, the distant lap of water against the shore, was amplified until it became intolerable. The RV itself shuddered beneath us, as though aware of our fear, pulsing in rhythm with our hearts. It began subtly at first. The RV doors rattled on their own. Handles twisted as if unseen hands were trying them. The fluorescent lights flickered violently. Then the engine roared to life briefly, sputtering, shaking the RV as though it were alive. Laura screamed as the shadows outside converged into humanoid shapes, black and fluid, moving with impossible speed. They didn't walk. They flowed across the ground, shapes stretching and compressing unnaturally. I grabbed the flashlight. Its beam cut through the darkness, illuminating one of the figures. For a split second, it appeared human. A man, eyes empty voids, limbs bending at impossible angles. Then it dissolved, melting into the forest like smoke. The RV groaned, the metal frame creaking under some unseen force. The engine sputtered again, then went silent. The forest was testing us, pushing us to our breaking point. The hallucinations became physical threats. Shadows seemed to extend into the RV itself. I felt something brush against my arm, cold and intangible yet terrifyingly real. Objects moved without contact. A chair slid across the floor, a cup tipped, spilling water that evaporated before hitting the ground. Laura's reflection in the side mirror no longer matched her movements. Her reflection smiled when she didn't. It raised a hand that she hadn't raised. She screamed, clutching my arm as the RV seemed to pulse in rhythm with her fear. We have to fight it, I shouted. Fight what? She cried. Whatever this is. We can't let it feed on us. I remembered the old survival tactics I had read about: distraction, focus, braking patterns. If the RV and forest were feeding on our attention, maybe redirecting it could give us a chance. I grabbed the generator and flashlight, creating bright, moving light to force the shadows to retreat temporarily. Laura threw objects out the RV windows, trying to confuse whatever was outside. It worked briefly. The forest and shadows seemed to hesitate, confused by the erratic patterns of light and movement. I seized the moment to try the ignition again. The RV groaned, engine sputtered, and it moved a few feet forward, then stopped violently as though the forest had gripped the wheels with invisible hands. Then it appeared. Standing at the edge of the treeline, a tall, impossibly thin figure with black void eyes. It didn't move like a person, its limbs bent and flexed in impossible directions. It raised one long, spindly arm, pointing directly at us. The whispers intensified. "Attention, attention, stay, you cannot leave." The RV groaned again. The tires sank slightly into the gravel as if the ground itself had turned against us. The figure didn't approach. Approach wasn't necessary. Its mere presence warped reality, bending the RV, the forest, and our perception into submission. I felt it first in my mind. The walls of the RV warped, stretching and contracting. Time itself felt elastic, moments elongated into eternity, then snapped back. Shadows pooled into impossible angles. Laura screamed as the side mirror reflected a forest that didn't exist, twisted and alien. I realized then, the RV wasn't just a trap. It was a conduit. The forest, the shadows, the figure, it was all feeding on our fear, bending reality to extract our attention, our minds. "We have to break focus," I whispered, more to myself than Laura. I closed my eyes and counted every breath, every heartbeat, visualizing the road, the campsite, the lake as they were before the forest began to warp them. Laura followed, matching my breaths. For the first time that night, the shadows hesitated. The whispers faltered. The RV groaned, then shuddered violently as though the forest was resisting our defiance. With a final surge, I turned the key. The engine roared to life, strong and steady. The tires gripped the gravel. I floored the accelerator. The RV lurched forward, moving away from the treeline. The shadows recoiled slightly, the whispers dimmed, the figure at the edge of the forest remaining frozen in place, watching. We didn't stop. We drove for miles, leaving the forest and lake behind, the roads finally straight and predictable. But even as dawn broke, a creeping awareness lingered. The forest, the RV, the shadows, they hadn't lost. They had only waited, patient and enduring. We had escaped, for now, but the influence had marked us. Our perception, our minds would never be fully our own again. By morning, the sun rose over a perfectly normal highway. The RV's engine purred steadily, tires gripping the asphalt without hesitation. The forest, the lake, the twisted treeline of the night before, they were gone, replaced with ordinary countryside. Birds sang. The smell of pine had vanished, replaced with the faint scent of asphalt and diesel. Laura and I stared at each other, exhausted, silent. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say. The horrors of the night before felt impossibly distant, and yet, every fiber of our being knew that nothing had truly ended. Even with daylight and escape, the forest's influence lingered. My hands shook slightly whenever I tried to hold the steering wheel steadily. Shadows cast by ordinary trees along the highway made me flinch. Reflections in rearview mirrors sometimes flickered, reminding me of the impossible shapes and black-eyed figures. Laura didn't speak much. When she did, it was in quiet, stuttering sentences. I keep seeing them, in mirrors, in corners. I tried to comfort her, to tell her it was our minds playing tricks, but deep down I knew better. The forest hadn't just trapped us physically, it had imprinted on our perceptions, our memories, and our fears. The RV itself seemed changed. Every creak and groan now felt alive, aware. I checked every system, every engine component. Mechanically it was fine. But every time I glanced at the side mirrors or the dashboard, I caught subtle movements, shadows flitting at the edges, as if the vehicle itself retained a memory of the forest's influence. Laura noticed it too. "It's like it remembers," she said quietly. "Like it knows what happened." I didn't disagree. I had learned that some things, once touched by the forest, cannot be fully trusted. The RV might start, move, and operate normally, but the consciousness within it, whatever had taken root during our ordeal, remained. Patient. Waiting. We stopped at a roadside diner for breakfast. The normalcy of the setting, clinking silverware, laughter of other patrons, sunlight streaming through windows, was almost unbearable in its contrast. Even here, though, the shadows lingered. Reflections in the polished surfaces caught shapes that weren't there. A black-eyed figure sometimes appeared at the edge of my vision, gone when I turned fully toward it. Every time I looked at Laura, I wondered if her expression carried traces of the forest's influence. We didn't discuss the night in detail. Words felt insufficient. The forest, the RV, the whispers, the shadows, it was as though describing them would give them substance again, would feed the same force that had trapped us. Days passed, but at night the whispers returned. Not as loud as before, not as immediate, but they were there. Softly, when the house was still and the wind brushed the trees outside, I could hear. Attention, observe, they remember. I stopped checking reflections, mirrors, and shadows. But the creeping awareness never fully left. The forest had marked us, leaving behind a subtle, omnipresent echo. The RV parked outside our home occasionally emitted a faint groan, a reminder that it was more than metal and mechanics. It was a vessel of something patient, intelligent, and malevolent. In the weeks that followed, we attempted to return to normal life. Work, errands, daily routines. But the smallest triggers would bring us back to that night. A shadow moving differently, a reflection that lingered too long, a whisper carried on the wind. We avoided bodies of water. We avoided forests. We avoided attention. Yet deep down we both knew that the forest, the RV, the shadows, they hadn't lost. They were patient. They waited for attention, for focus, for fear to feed on. And we had given them more than enough. One evening, months after the event, I parked the RV in our driveway. Laura had gone inside to make dinner. I leaned against the side, staring down the street. For a moment, the black-eyed figure appeared at the edge of our yard, not moving, just watching. The shadows of the trees behind it bent unnaturally toward it. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished, leaving only a lingering sense of attention, of being observed. I knew then that it was not an ending. That night in Cedar Hollow State Park had been a beginning. The RV had carried a fragment of the forest's consciousness away with it. Patient, intelligent, waiting, and someday it might decide we were worth feeding on again. I shivered and turned away. The whispers were silent for now, but they were never gone.